Om Om Sarvadharmastapakastham Sarvadharmaswarupakah Acharyanam Mahacharyo Ramakrishna Ayate Namaha. We are studying Sri Ramakrishna, the Great Master, as the spiritual teacher, second part, and we are in the third chapter. Na? Yes, we are in the third chapter, and we are read up to para 30. And which Ramakrishna we have gone to Kashi, Vrindavan, Kashi again, did not go to Gaya, and have come back to Dakshinesha. Now we come to para 31. The master visited Navadvip. For those people outside Bengal who have no idea of Navadvip, Navadvip is a town in Bengal where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was born. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's childhood name was Nimai, because he was born under a neem tree. And his sannyas name, the famous name is Shri Krishna Chaitanya Bharati. But he is more known as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That is how he is commonly known. And that place is Navadvip. Besides visiting the places of pilgrimage like Kashi, Vrindavan, etc., the master at one time went to Navadvip. One time, we do not know the exact period. The master at one time went to Navadvip, the birthplace of Chaitanya, the Great Lord. In English, they have translated literally Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Chaitanya, the Great Lord. Mathur Babu took the master with him there also. Mathur Babu took the master. Whether master wished to go or Mathur wanted to go, and I went with him, whatever. It is clear. No. From what the master told us on one occasion about Gauranga, it is clear that all Gauranga is another name for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because he was very fair complexion. It is clear that all truths do not always remain revealed even to the minds of incarnations of God. You understand this point? We'll see in the narration that as we, many of us even today, are not sure about Chaitanya being an incarnation. So Sri Ramakrishna also was not sure that Chaitanya is an incarnation. But when he tried to know, he came to know. For that he is telling that even to the minds of incarnations, all truths do not always remain revealed. But whatever truth of the spiritual world they want to know and understand, comes very easily within the range of their mind and intellect. Mind and intellect, why is that? Known and understand. So mind is put here as yeah, known and understand. In Bengali, Manobuddhir Gochar Vaiyat hai. Revealed to mind and revealed to intellect. The previous opinion of the master about Chaitanya, the great Lord, and the change of that opinion after having his vision at Navadvip. Many among us at that time were then skeptical about Gauranga being an incarnation of God. Many amongst Thakur's disciples. So much so that the word Vaishnava meant for us but the low class people. Not low caste, low class. People of a lower type. And there is an incident in Leelaprasanga. Saradananda Swamiji's friend Vaikunta Sandhya, his house was in Navadvip. So when he visited Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Ramakrishna said, how see, nice there, dancing, in a picture. He said, my house is in Navadvip. I know. Bostum Fostum Choto Lokai. Bostum Fostum. That means the very pronunciation of the word Vaishnava, he had a Vaishnava Vaishnava. So that is the word when we use for deriding somebody. So that was the idea in their mind. Of course, when I am telling that incident, Thakur said, oh, you have come from Navadvip. One more salutation. Because Thakur's habit was as soon as somebody comes, he used to salute. Now because he's from Navadvip, so one more salute. They also questioned the master about it in order to remove their doubt. They mean some of us, many among us. In reply, the master said to us, I also had that attitude formerly. I thought, how could Chaitanya be an incarnation as there was not the slightest mention of it in the Bhagavata and other Puranas? So, where is avatar mentioned? How do you know about avatar? It's an important point, let me discuss. Where we get the first idea of avatar? If you go to Vedanta, then Gita is the first book which is telling about avatar. And there no number is given. No list is given. Whenever adharma, dharma subsides and adharma grows, I come. Then among the Puranas, as he has mentioned, Bhagavad is the main Puran which talks about avatar. And mind you, in Bhagavata, 24 avatars are listed, 24. And at the end he says that after that list, that 24 I mentioned, but avatar ahi asankhya, avatars are innumerable. So this 10 avatars is nowhere come in standard scriptures. Now, in Bhagavatam there is a list of 24. In that Chaitanya is not mentioned. One reason is that Bhagavata is written much before Chaitanya. But there a Kalki and a future avatar is also mentioned, one Kalki. But Chaitanya is not mentioned. Sri Ramakrishna also is not mentioned. But Thakur is telling that for Thakur, the standard of reference was his Bhagavad and some other Puranas. And other Puranas, not the slightest mention of it. So how he can be an avatar? The shaven-headed Vaishnavas do Mundal, the Vaishnava sannyasis. The shaven-headed Vaishnavas have set him up to be an incarnation. Thakur is to be like that. Thakur tells everything like us so that we can also understand. I could never believe that. I went to Navadvip with Mathur. It's a place of pilgrimage Thakur has gone with. Of course, he had a thought in the mind. He had heard that Navadvip. I thought that if we were an incarnation, there must linger there a little at least of the manifestation. I shall understand it when I see it. So this is another great power of perception in Thakur. You are so confident. As Saradananda Swamiji has said already. Oh, I wanted to discuss one more point there. That if I want to know, I will know. There what Saradananda Swamiji has said, we are going back a little now. All truths do not always remain revealed even to the minds of incarnations of God, but whatever truth of the spiritual world they want to know and understand. Why is mentioned like that? There is an incident that is disciples were talking about microscope. That very small things can be seen magnified. So Thakur showed some interest. Yes, I want to see. Now the brother of one of the disciples, Preman Swami's brother, had received one microscope from the college or university as a prize. So they asked him to bring. He brought. And he set it up. And they asked Thakur to see. So Thakur went there, came back. 2-3 times he came back. He said, my mind is refusing to see. So it is not a truth of the spiritual world. So if he wants to know spiritual truth, he reveals. That is why he has mentioned like that. He is not interested in knowing politics or this or that. If required, he can know. That is, anyway, we are digressing. But Swami Vivekananda in Harvard gave a lecture on Vedanta. But the professor wanted to show that we know more. So they asked Swami, have you studied chemistry? He said, yes. Will you tell us the names of famous authors? And Swamiji narrated such a big list that all of them together did not know. Because that was required at that point to show to the world that Swamiji knows more than them. So he thought of it and came to it. But Thakur, of course, is not going to try that. Anyway. So Thakur was confident. I thought that if you were an incarnation, there must linger there a little at least of the manifestation. I shall understand it when I see it. In order to detect even a little manifestation of divinity, I took walks hither and thither, to the house of the senior Gosai, to the house of the junior Gosai. Their preachers and followers are called Goswamis, and so on. But I saw nothing particular anywhere. Everywhere I found a wooden figure standing with its arm raised upward. Chaitanya. I felt dejected to see it. I regretted my going there because it is not a pilgrimage. Afterwards, I was going to step into the boat for my return trip when I saw a wonderful vision. Two beautiful boys of 12 of tender age were the two, Chaitanya and his associate Nityananda. I never saw such beauty. They had the complexion of molten gold, each having a halo of light around its head, raising their hands and looking at me. They were running towards me through the sky. And I cried out immediately, there they come, there they come. Because he has heard about Chaitanya and Nityananda. Scarcely had I uttered those words before they came and entered here into his own body. So that is what Bhairavi told her. That in this time it is written in the books that this time Chaitanya will be born in Nityananda's body. So both together. I lost normal consciousness and fell down. I would have fallen into the water, but for Ritu who was beside me and caught hold of me. I was shown many such things convincing me of their really being incarnation, the manifestations of the divine power. Now the question is why I did not see? Understood? What we call Navadip is not the original Navadip. The original Navadip is drowned in that river. So when he came to enter the boat, then he saw this. This is the full explanation. Thakur himself has given that. The master said many such things. One day he told us of his vision of Gauranga's Sankirtan in the streets of the town. We have mentioned it elsewhere in this book. Repetition is unnecessary. This has created a lot of anomaly. And today while thinking, I got the answer. He started writing with Guru Purvardhan. And we are reading in that very sequence. And we have never met this. Here in the English book, they are given footnote of second volume, Sadhak Bhav, which he wrote much afterwards. And in the Bengali, they have given seventh chapter of Guru Bhav. That has yet to come. So how to understand this? You have any idea? Just now, today while reading this, I got the answer. Saradananda Swamiji first wrote as a serial in Udbodhan. And in that, a little is given in the seventh chapter and much more in that Sadhak Bhav. Then he turned them in the book. And this sentence has been added while making a book. Now you understand. What he wrote is Udbodhan, he has revised a little while printing the book. Not only that, I found one more thing. In this connection I am telling you. I wanted, you see, my Bengali book was 2-volume book. Previously I had the 5-volume book. And I wanted that badly. So I requested the present month of the Udbodhan Ashram. Do you have 5-volume edition? He said yes. Will you send to me? He said yes. And what he sent to me? The cyclostyle copies of the first edition of it. Leelaprasanga. And there, Saradananda Swami himself has marked in pencil the changes he will do in the second edition. So up to the second edition, it is Saradananda himself. Some words here and there. So it is from the Udbodhan print, when it came to book form, he saw that he has already written it in great detail. And so he has inserted this sentence here. That is the only explanation as far as I can understand. If any of the Shrotas has some other explanation, it will come. But here it is anomalous. Because up till now we have not met with it. And English book mentions second part. And Bengali book mentions seventh chapter of this part. So it is all about the first edition. And while making the second edition, he saw that he has already written. So he has added this sentence here. Okay, let us proceed. So, I was shown many such things convincing me of their really big incarnations. There means here plural has come. Hey, Chaitanya and Nityananda. The manifestations of the divine power. The master said many such things. Oh. No, these are two separate sentences. Right? Master once told that I have said many such things. And this itself he said many times. We have mentioned it elsewhere in this book, repetition is unnecessary. So we also will meet, when we meet them, in those description we shall see. So Navadvip is over. Now the master went to Kalna. This is big history. Besides going to the, Kalna is a town within Bengal. Besides going to the holy places named above, the master once went to Kalna with Mathur Babu. Kalna is a small town in Bengal. And why he went there is not pilgrimage, but he had heard of a great Vaishnava saint there. To meet him he had gone. But in the background there is a very big story. Master once went to Kalna with Mathur Babu. Many villages, many villages of Bengal on the Ganga, so it's a town on the Ganga, have become places of pilgrimage because of the touch of the feet of Gauranga, the great Lord. So Gauranga has gone there. Kalna is one of them. Again, every visitor without exception has felt that the glorious acts like the setting up of 108 Shiva temples by the family of the Prince of Burdwan in Kalna have made Kalna a place of pomp and splendor. Not only pilgrimage, but pomp and splendor. But the master had a different purpose in going to Kalna this time. His attention was to see Bhagwan Das, the respected Vaishnava father, the well-known sadhu of that place. So Thakur, whenever he used to know scholars and sadhakas, he used to go. So it is one of that. The renunciation, devotion, and fame of Bhagwan Das. Bhagwan Das, the respected Vaishnava father, was then probably more than 80 years old at that time. Probably. It is not known to us what family he sanctified by his birth, but his glowing renunciation dispassion and devotion to God were known to a great many of the men, women and children of Bengal, though not outside. Both his legs, it is said, became paralyzed in the last stage of his life on account of his sitting day and night in the same posture at the same place, practicing japa, austerity, meditation, etc. You know a similar case in the mission? Swami Geetanandaji, our previous vice president, who has passed away now, used to do so much japa that later on his feet had become like that. But although he was more than 80 years old and had become disabled for any work and almost destitute of the power of getting up, his great zeal in taking the name of Hari and shedding incessant tears of joy, enjoying the bliss of divine love, did not decrease. So the physical incapacity did not decrease his devotion. Rather, in such people, physical disability on one side and the devotion increases on the other. Rather, it increased day by day. The Vaishnava community of that place had much of spiritual life infused into them on account of his company. So he was like a guru to all. Many of the Vaishnava holy men of renunciation got the opportunity of shaping their own lives after his bright example and according to his instruction. Whoever, it is said, came to pay a visit to the Father at that time felt in his heart of hearts the accumulated influence of his long practice of austerity, purity, devotion and renunciation. Austerity, purity, devotion and renunciation. We find everywhere that renunciation is compulsorily mentioned along with devotion. And that results in austerity, purity, and enjoyed an extraordinary bliss before he returned. Anybody who went there, that word अपूर्व आनंदेर उपलब्धि कर्या आशित. You should change this enjoyment, I already told you. Experience great joy. Experience great bliss. Enjoyed an extraordinary bliss. Experienced an extraordinary bliss before he returned. The people there took all his opinions on Sri Chaitanya's religion of love to be infallible and engaged themselves in carrying them into practice. So, like Sangha Guru. Therefore, the perfected father did not then keep himself engaged in his own sadhana only, but spent much time in discussing and making practical what would conduce to the welfare of the Vaishnava community. What would lead the Vaishnavas who had chosen renunciation to the right practice of it and make them blessed. Again, renunciation. Only bhakti is leg. If bhakti is one leg, renunciation is the other leg. And what would make the worldly people in general take refuge in the religion of love, preached by Sri Chaitanya, and make them attain peace. So, two categories. Those who have devotion should have renunciation, and those who do not have should have devotion. People used to bring to the notice of the Father whatever happened in any part of the Vaishnava community, such as the good or bad conduct of sadhus in any place. He heard and reflected on them and gave instruction as to what should be done. There is always an invisible firm bond in the realm of renunciation. Again and again brings renunciation. Austerity and love. People obeyed the words of the Father most submissively and would have themselves hastened to act accordingly. Understood? No formal organization. That is why he said such a spiritual rule is always there. Not that there was formalization, he was president or general secretary. No such thing. Invisible firm bond. Although he had no spies, the keen eye of the perfected Father fell on everything, done everywhere in the Vaishnava community, and every person of that community felt his influence. So people would immediately report to him. While on the one hand, the ardor of those of simple faith increased day by day under that protecting vision and influence, the insincere on the other hand, among Vaishnavas there are a lot of insincere people, felt a sort of unknown fear and shrinking into themselves tried to change their own nature. That is the command. Religious movements in India during the period of the master sadhana. Now, how so much has happened? Because Thakur Sadhana. Important religious movements, as we have mentioned, were going on in many parts of the modern India when, under the intense urge of divine love, the master engaged himself in severe austerities for 12 years for the realization of God, and a wonderful power as the spiritual teacher was beginning to be manifested in him. This is what happens. When the avatar has come, then everywhere that wave rise. The movements of the Hari Samaj and the Brahma Samaj in Calcutta and various places near it. So even Brahma Samaj had so many activities in those days. And various places near it. The propagation of the Vedic religion by Swami Dayananda in the Punjab, Arya Samaj, and the northwestern part of India, which has become famous later as the Arya Samaj. At the time that name was not there, but the movement was there. The movements of the pure Vedanta, of the Karta Bhaja, and the Radha Swami sect in Bengal, Syami, Radha Syami, and that of Narayan Swami in Gujarat. So these two you should know. Have you heard anything of the Radha Swami? You know something? Yes, sir. What is Radha Swami? He is talking of Bengal. And there is a river Vyasa. You have heard? Sindhu Nadi has 4 tributaries. Punjab. What is the meaning of the word Punjab? 5 rivers. Ab means water. 5 waters flow there, so it is called Punjab. Now, because of division, Pakistan and India, 2 rivers have gone to Pakistan. So there is a river Vyas in Punjab. And at the bank of it, that origin or something, but that town also is called Vyas. And there the headquarters is there. So throughout India you will find Radha Swami, throughout India. And their board will say Radha Swami Satsanga Vyas. According to the Punjabi pronunciation Beas, Vyas. So what is this Radha Swami? The originator of that was thought to be Krishna, a man. And so his name is Radha Swami. And the fun is that the members, they will never say we belong to Radha Swami Sampradaya. They will say we are Radha Swamis. In Punjab, in Chandigarh, a lot of them are there, everywhere. And they worship the living Guru. That means the Guru goes to any town and in that Sabha, he sits on an asana and all people sitting meditate on him. That is Radha Swami. And the good point of Radha Swami, many people are members, many professors and so many people. And the good point is that he takes oath from people. I will never drink wine. I will never indulge in corrupt practices. Like that. And most of them would say, sincerely follow that. Anyway, that is about Radha Swami. Then, he says Radha Swami is Shakti in Bengal. He has seen in Bengal, it's origin from Vyasa. And that of Narayan Swami in Gujarat. Narayan Swami, you know, they are also throughout India now, originated in Gujarat. And their founder is called Narayan Swami. And golden, very, very rich people, very, very rich devotees. They have golden images of their deities. Gold, made of gold, images. And on Utsav days, they feed thousands of devotees every day. So it is a great Bhakti Sampradaya. And there are sannyasis there. Householder devotees, but the people there are sannyasis. So, Narayan Swami in Gujarat, all these religious movements were founded and carried on shortly before and after that time. That time, Thakur Sadhana time. It is not our intention to discuss here in detail these movements and doctrines. We shall describe to the reader only one event about the master in Harisabha, situated at Kalutola in Calcutta. Kalutola and Mohalla area of Calcutta. The master went to the Harisabha at Kalutola. One day the master was invited and he went to that Harisabha. Hriday, his nephew, accompanied him. Some say that Pandit Vaishnav Charan, whom we have mentioned before, was engaged in reading and explaining the Bhagavata there that day, and the master went there to listen. But we do not remember to have heard the circumstances from the master himself. So he has mentioned some say. Be that as it may, the reading was going on, and all were absorbed in listening to it. When the master arrived there, the master sat among the audience and was listening to the reading. The reading of the Bhagavata in that Sabha. The members of that Harisabha regarded themselves as having absolutely taken refuge at Sri Chaitanya's holy feet. And in order to remember constantly this fact, they spread a sheet and assuming the presence of the great Lord on it, carried on before it, worship, reading, and all the other activities of the sub. That seat was called the seat of Sri Chaitanya. All devoutly made salutations to him in the front of that seat. No image or anything, only seat. They never allowed anybody to sit on it. The reading was being done in front of that seat, decorated with garlands of flowers, etc. That day, as on all other days. The reader was reading devoutly, thinking that he was doing it for the great Lord. And the listeners rejoiced to think that they were sitting in his divine presence and were blessed with drinking the nectar of Hari's words. The joy and the devotional mood of the reader and the listeners became, it is superfluous to say, intensified 100-fold on the arrival of the Master. Their actually living manifestation is there. The Master occupied the seat of Sri Chaitanya. The Master lost himself listening to the nectar-like words of the Bhagavata. He ran towards the seat of Sri Chaitanya, stood on it, and entered into so profound a samadhi that not even the slightest movement of the vital force was observable in him. Nirvikalpa samadhi. No prana function. Because of that atmosphere and sanctity of the seat, must have been there. Seeing that extraordinary loving smile on his effulgent face, and the upward pointing of his finger in his uplifted hand, as in the image of Sri Chaitanya. So, Chaitanya within himself is manifested there. Eminent devotees felt in their heart of hearts that the Master in Bhavamukha had become completely identified with the great Lord, that having ascended to a higher plane of consciousness, namely that of Bhavamukha, he was not then at all conscious of the great distance of time, place, and other things, which in gross eyes separated his bodily and mental existence from those of Sri Chaitanya. He became identified with Chaitanya. The reader forgot to read and was motionless, looking at him. Although unable to grasp and understand the Bhavasamadhi of the Master, the listeners also became overwhelmed with an indescribable, extraordinary awe and astonishment, and remained calm and charmed. Nobody could then say anything good or bad, experiencing an indescribable bliss for the time being. All felt that they were carried away, so to speak, by the powerful current of the Master's spiritual mood to an indefinable realm. They did not at first know what to do, but later, impelled by that indescribable feeling, they raised a chorus of the loud shout of Hari and began singing his name, Haribol, Haribol. When discussing the nature of Samadhi, that he has done in Bhava Samadhi and etc., we have already said that the mind depended for coming down from Samadhi and becoming conscious of the external world on that particular name of God by which it realized an infinite divine mass of ideas at the time of entering Samadhi. We daily observe this over and over again in the Master. While he heard the name of Hari sung, the Master became a little conscious of his own body. Filled with love and devotion, he then mixed with those who were singing in a chorus and sometimes danced charmingly in an unrestrained way, and sometimes remained motionless in ecstasy in that jam on account of the excess of spiritual emotion. The zeal of all present increased 100-fold owing to that behavior of the Master. They became inebriated and began singing kirtan. Only Haribol, Haribol were there, and then they started singing bhajan. Who was then to judge whether it was right or wrong for the master to occupy the seat of Sri Chaitanya? After singing the noble qualities of Sri Hari and of the great Lord Mahaprabhu, accompanied by unrestrained dancing for a long time, all cried out victory to the divine Lord and brought that divine sport to a close for that day. Automatically, it lessened by physical tiredness and all that. The master returned to Dakshineshwar shortly afterwards. A commotion over it arose in the Vaishnava community. When the mind comes to lower plane, although people's natural tendency to pick holes in others became benumbed for some time, when they reached a plane of higher spiritual emotion through the divine influence of the master singing of the name of Hari and unrestrained dancing, all of them resumed their normal fault-finding attitude, normal. Like the mouse of the fable Punar Mushika. You know this fable? A rishi was there and a mouse was being chased by a cat. So he came near the rishi. So rishi saw the thing and he uttered some mantra or said, let you become a cat. So the mouse became a cat. Then later on dogs were chasing that cat. So he said, let you become a dog. So finally, tiger or lion, he met that. And when that tiger or lion came to devour or damage that rishi himself, then he said, become mouse again. And he became again mouse. So there is a famous saying in Sanskrit, Punar Mushika Bhava. Punar Mushika. When the master came away from that place, their mind was raised. When master came away, they all become Mushika. That is indeed the defect of all the religions that neglect knowledge and teach the aspirants for God realization to depend on devotion alone. Emotion rises and it comes. And this knowledge is mixed. Though the travelers on the paths of those religions reach very easily high blissful states of spiritual moods for some time through singing the name of Sri Hari and other such devotional exercises, they come down the next moment to corresponding low states of consciousness. As high, so much low. They are not much to blame for it, for it is the nature of the body and mind, the evolution of Prakriti, to lapse into lassitude after stimulation. Rajatama will follow. If Rajaguna will, then will become Tama. It is a law of nature that depressions follow crest or ridges and lassitude follows stimulation. Now, during the depression, after that high current of spiritual mood, the depression here is not sorrow depression. Mind goes down, that's all. The members of the Harisabha also came under the influence of their own previous nature and impressions and busied themselves in criticizing the master's action. One party vindicated the master's occupying the seat of Sri Chaitanya, who had some elevation in Mahamud, and the other party engaged themselves in making strong protest. There was a great quarrel between the parties, but they arrived at no conclusion. This controversy spread gradually from mouth to mouth everywhere in the Vaishnava community. Bhagwan Das also heard of it. This was not known to Thakur. He wanted to see Bhagwan Das. That was, however, not the only thing that mattered, but apprehensive lest, that means Thakur has claimed, that is a different thing. But again, it should not happen. But apprehensive lest feigning divine emotion, selfish and cunning hypocrites, desirous of name and fame, should similarly occupy that seat. Some of the members of the Hari Sabha went to him to ascertain how it might be prevented in future. Bhagavan thus became annoyed to hear of the occupation of the seat of Sri Chaitanya. The perfected father Siddha, who had taken refuge at the feet of Sri Chaitanya, was very much annoyed on hearing of the occupation of the seat of his own chosen ideal by the unknown Ramakrishna. And blinded by anger, he did not hesitate to call him names and even to describe him as a hypocrite. The annoyance and anger of the father we can easily understand. Now double to see the members of the Harisabha, that means they knew that regime and he had done like that. Now the members have gone there to find out what should be done. We can easily understand now double to see the members of the Harisabha and he scolded them saying that they were culpable in having allowed that improper action to be done in their presence. When afterwards his anger abated, the father determined what arrangements should be made in order that none might behave similarly in future. But he, who was the occasion of all that commotion, could not know much of it. Much of it, something might have gone to his way, not much. The master went to the hermitage of Bhagwan, not due to this, to meet him. A few days after that event, that is how divine providence had arrived. A few days after that event had taken place, Sri Ramakrishna of his own accord went to Kalna with Mathur Babu and Hridaya. So he told Mathur and Hridaya to come there. When the boat reached the ghat, very early, they go by river. Very early in the morning, Mathur became busy with arrangements for board and lodging. He would stay there for some time. Sri Ramakrishna, in the meantime, went out with Hridaya to see the town and ascertaining the father's address from people, approached his hermitage. Hridaya told the father about the master. When he was to go to the presence of an unknown person, it very often happened that the childlike master at first felt an indescribable fear, shyness, etc. Always. We have observed that mood of his many a time. That was the case also when he was going to see the father, asking Hridaya to go ahead. He covered almost his whole body from head to foot with a piece of cloth and followed him to the hermitage. Gradually, Hridaya went up to the father, saluted him, and said, "My maternal uncle loses himself in the name of God. He has been expressing that state for a long time. He has come to pay a visit to you." The father was annoyed at the action of his certain son. Some other discussion was going on. Hridaya says that as soon as he approached him, he became acquainted with the power of the father born of sadhana. For before he had spoken the aforesaid words, after saluting the father, he heard him say, "Some great soul, it seems, has come to the hermitage." So when Thakur went there, covered and all that, he had felt that. Saying these words, the father looked around. But as he did not see anyone except Ritu coming, he applied his mind to the topic he had been discussing with those before him. Thakur was going beyond Ritu, covered himself. A particular Vaishnava sadhu had done something wrong. What was to be done about him was the discussion then going on. The father was much annoyed at that improper action of the sadhu and was scolding him, saying that he would snatch away his string of beads. The sadhu was being taken there. He would snatch away his string of beads and expel him from the community and so on. At that moment, Sri Ramakrishna came there saluted the father, and sat humbly beside the persons assembled there. His face was not clearly seen by anyone, as the whole of his body was covered with a piece of cloth. As soon as he came and sat down, Hriday spoke to the father his introductory words mentioned above. At the words, before Hriday approached, he had seen. But when Hriday went and showed, this is my maternal uncle. As the words of Hriday, the father suspended the talk he was engaged in, returned the salutation of the master and Hriday, and made inquiries about them. Bhagwan Das's egotism of teaching people. So two sides. He was an advanced sadhaka, but not yet perfected. Though in one translation, perfected father. Siddha means he had some power. That is the meaning. So there we should change that word perfected. Seeing that the father was counting his beads at intervals during his conversation with Hriday, the latter said, that is Vaishnava, you talk also and count beads. Sir, why do you count your beads even now? You have become perfect. You have no necessity for that. We are not sure whether Hriday put that question to the father according to the intention of the master or of his own accord. Whether master prompted him or Hriday himself said. But it seemed that he did so on his own. For being always engaged in the master's service and mixing with many people, high and low, in the company of the master, Hriday had developed to a great extent presence of mind and the power of raising topics suitable to the time and circumstances. The father at first expressed humility at the question of Hriday and afterwards said, even though I personally do not require these things, they are very necessary for me in order to educate people. They will otherwise go astray by imitating me. The master in Bhavasamadhi protested against the annoyance and egotism of the father. Now Thakur speaks out in Bhavamukti. Always depending entirely like a boy on the universal mother in all respects. The master had a reliance upon her so easy, natural, and inward that he felt a great pain to see or hear any person doing or intending to do anything under the impulse of egoism, let alone himself doing anything that way. Therefore, beside using the word I as the servant of God, on rare occasions, he could never use that word in any other mood, as we do. Anyone who saw the master, even for a short time, was charmed and astounded to see that trait of his. That humility was seen by everybody. Or to see his great annoyance at such apparently harmless egotistic expression used by anyone else, as I will do such and such an action. He would be led to wonder what great offense he had committed to provoke such annoyance. Of that man. Now, as soon as he came to Bhagwan Das, the master heard him first of all to say that he would snatch away the string of beads from someone and expel him from the community. Again, a little after that, he heard him say that he had not given up counting the beads and the putting on of tilaka so that he might teach people better. When the father said again and again, I will expel him, I will teach people, I have not given up putting on tilaka, etc. The simple-hearted master could not suppress his annoyance as we do, following the ways of these so-called cultured people. Gentlemen, we don't want to criticize others. This is the trait when sadhus do this, it is very difficult. So-called cultured people. He suddenly stood up and said to the father, what? You are so great to see even now? Will you teach people? Will you expel him? Will you accept or reject things? Who are you to teach people? Will you teach them if he to whom the world belongs does not do that? The covering of the master's body had then fallen. The cloth he was wearing had become loose and had fallen from his loin, and his face was illumined with an extraordinary divine effect. He became naked. He was beside himself. That means what he is doing is not talking. And was, it seemed, unconscious of what and to whom he was speaking. Again, hardly had he said those few words when he was motionless and speechless in samadhi on account of the excess of spiritual motion. The father accepted the truth of the master's words. Rani had bet him he did not beat but scold. And the higher people, they understand. Everybody had been showing respect for and devotion. That is the case. Everybody had been showing respect for and devotion to the perfected Father. Perfected, he says. Till then. No one till then had been bold enough to protest against his words or point out his defects. He was at first astonished to see that action of the Master. But unlike ordinary people, a sudden came. But unlike ordinary people who under such circumstances, I will continue, become angry and determined to avenge themselves, the father had not that feeling in his mind. The sincerity born of tapas came to his help, sincerity born of tapas, and made him understand the truth of the words of Sri Ramakrishna. He felt that there was no other doer in the world than God. And however much a man might think in his egotism that he was doing everything, he was actually a slave of circumstance and could do only as much as he had been given to do and understand. And that although worldly people might do whatever they like, a devotee should not forget this truth even for a moment, lest he should go astray. Thus, the powerful words of the Master opened the Father's inward vision to a great extent, showed him his faults, and made him humble and modest. Again, seeing that extraordinary manifestation of the spiritual mood in the person of Sri Ramakrishna, the Father became convinced that he was not an ordinary person. The loving conversation between the Master and the Bhagavan, Mathur's service to the sadhus of the hermitage. Mathur came later on. We can very easily infer that there flowed an extraordinary current of wonderful bliss during their conversation on the Divine Lord. During that talk, the Master was experiencing Bhav Samadhi and enjoying unbounded bliss at short intervals. And the Father was charmed to see that there was always manifested in the person of Sri Ramakrishna that great mood in the study and understanding of which through the scriptures he spent so much of his time. So he had studied and he saw in Sri Ramakrishna. Therefore his devotion to and reverence for Sri Ramakrishna became profound. When afterward the father came to know that he was the Paramahansa of Dakshineshwar, who under the influence of a spiritual mood had lost himself and occupied the seat of Sri Chaitanya at the Harisabha of Kalutala, there was no limit to his sorrow and repentance. He thought, is it this person whom I called names for nothing? He saluted Sri Ramakrishna with humility and asked his pardon for it. Thus came to an end the play of love on the part of the master and the father that day. Sri Ramakrishna came to Mathur with Hriday a little later, described to him that event from beginning to end, and highly praised the exalted spiritual state of the man. So he is not angry actually on that count. Hearing all that, Mathur went to pay a visit to the father and made arrangements for the service of the images of the hermitage and a special festival for that day. So some pot does not make the man small. That is a pot, that is clear, but not the man. ओम सर्वधर्म स्थापकस्तम सर्वधर्म स्वरूपका आचार्याणाम आचार्यो रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। ओम शांति शांति शांति। हरि ओम तत्सत। श्री रामकृष्ण।